Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Scott Giacomucci, and today I want to talk about a topic close to my heart and many others, losing a loved one to suicide and coping with the grief and finding healing in the aftermath. So losing a loved one to suicide is one of the most difficult things that anybody could go through. The grief is complicated, the emotions are overwhelming, and many of the questions are just unanswerable. If you're struggling with this kind of loss, know that you're definitely not alone. There's many other people going through the same thing. So let's talk about what makes this kind of traumatic grief different than normal grief and how we can begin to heal. So there's lots of reasons why traumatic grief and grief from suicide might feel different than other types of grief. Maybe the first and most obvious is just the shock and disbelief that can come with it. That one minute our loved one is there and the next minute they're not. And it can really stir up our system. It can leave us feeling surprised and shocked, even if there were warning signs. And many times there aren't any warning signs. The loss can feel really surreal, really sudden. And this can often lead to guilt and self-blame and lots of what ifs, lots of thoughts and ruminations around what if I had just done this? What if I had just said this? What if I hadn't done that? What if I had given them a call? Or what if I had texted them back? Many survivors question if we could have done more, or why didn't we see the signs before somebody killed themselves? While this self-blame can be painful, suicide is never one person's fault. Sometimes these what ifs and these feelings of blaming ourselves are our brain's way of trying to make sense of something that doesn't make any sense. Losing a loved one to suicide also leave us feeling really angry and confused. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be angry at the world. It's okay to be angry at the situation. It's okay to be angry at the person who died. These are perfectly common. Suicide could feel like we're being abandoned by our loved one, even though their choice to kill themselves almost definitely stems from really deep suffering that they were experiencing. There's also a lot of stigma around suicide. Unlike other types of loss, suicide can have really intense societal judgments, or it can be really hard to talk about, or there can be lots of shame around it, or there can be assumptions that people are judging us or judging the family, suggesting that somebody's family is to blame for their family member's suicide. And this can make it really hard to talk about. Many friends and family don't know what to say when someone dies of suicide. And so all of this contributes to the complicated grief that we feel in the aftermath of suicide. And that feelings of grief don't always follow a simple trajectory. That many times grief is really messy. There's not a predictable pattern. Sadness and numbness can come in different waves and really impact us. And we could really be left longing for answers to the unanswerable questions. There also can be a lot of complicated religious beliefs wrapped up in the experience of suicide, which can make it even harder to mourn. In some religious traditions, someone who dies of suicide can't be buried in a religious cemetery, or someone who dies of suicide is believed to not be permitted to enter heaven. And so these belief systems, right or wrong, really just further contribute to the difficulty of navigating the loss of suicide, further complicating the grief and making it harder for loved ones of the person who died to make sense of the loss and to continue on with their lives in a good way. So how do we cope with loss that stems from suicide? And this is a big question, and I definitely don't have all the answers here. And things are going to be different from person to person. What works for me might not work for someone else, and what works for you might not work for someone else too. So when it comes to grief from suicide, there's lots of feelings, lots of emotions, lots of judgments. And one thing we can say for sure is that we need to allow ourselves to feel the feelings. That some days we're just going to be sad, and that's okay. Some days we're going to be angry, and that's okay too. Some days we're going to feel lots of self-blame or guilt or confused, and that's okay. And some days we might feel relief, or we might even feel a sense of contentment, and that's okay too. So we need to allow ourselves to feel everything without judging ourselves for how we're feeling. That there isn't a single way to grieve or a right way to grieve. Another helpful thing in terms of coping from grief is to let go of that self-blame and all those what ifs. Ruminating on what we could have done or could have said isn't going to help. Believing that we should have known or that we could have stopped this These are really natural and normal, but just not helpful. Suicide is complicated. It's often linked to deeper mental health struggles, and no single action or conversation is going to prevent suicide. So we need to let go of that self-blame. We need to let go of the what ifs and the questioning. Another thing that can be really helpful is finding a support system. So rather than isolate ourselves after experiencing a loss, we need to talk to people. We need to talk to our friends. We need to talk to family. Maybe we need professional support and can connect with a therapist who understands grief from suicide. If your current circle of friends and family doesn't offer the support that you really need, find new support. There's plenty of support groups out there for folks that have experienced similar losses. There's therapy groups, there's communities of people that are going through the same thing as you who really understand this unique form of grief. Another helpful thing to do is to really honor the life of the loved one who died. Not just focus on their death, but honor their life. That our loved ones who die of suicide are more than their final moment and more than their suicide. They had vibrant, full lives. And we can remember the positive memories. We can talk about our favorite memories with them. We can, look at the pictures and videos from their life rather than just focusing on their death. We can celebrate their life through telling stories or participating in causes that they cared about. On top of that, we really need to take care of ourselves, even when it feels difficult. That grief can really impact our bodies as well as our minds and our spirits, of course. And we need to continue to take care of ourselves, to get enough rest, to continue our normal eating patterns, to exercise and to move, and to be patient with ourselves, that healing is going to take time. Grief after suicide is complicated, and nobody has to carry it alone. There's plenty of other people that have gone through the same thing. And many people have found ways to continue living fulfilling and meaningful lives, even though the loss and the grief will always be there to some degree. I've experienced many deaths to suicide of people close to me and found ways to make sense of the loss, to honor their loss, to make promises or commitments to the people that I've lost to better my life and to better the world and to honor their memory in doing so. And I encourage you to do the same. So I encourage you to leave a comment below on the video here and tell us what has helped you to make sense of your loss by suicide, and what suggestions would you offer to others that are struggling and going through the same thing and watching this video. If you found this video useful, I encourage you to like or subscribe. That way you'll get notified about future videos that we publish on the page. Thanks.